Welcome back, Evolvers. We are here at Evolve Ventures with Amelia, otherwise known as Eve, for you to be able to actually implement change. And these are for people who want to actually grow and take the actions that are necessary to grow, because the key here is that most people try to change their thoughts, but ultimately change itself actually starts in the body. And so if you are with us today, you are going to understand some of the most basic principles that are absolutely necessary for change. Changing the body allows us to change our thoughts, allows us to change our behaviors, and implement the change that we wish to become in the world. So, for context, in the last couple of episodes, we have been talking about how so many people can understand our patterns. We can even see our beliefs. In our last episode, we talked about how there are key fundamental beliefs that we all have that likely are unconsciously holding us back from the change that we want to implement. So you might even know what your beliefs are at this point, and you may know where they came from. And yet you might still feel stuck, because at the end of the day, change does not start with an insight alone. It actually starts with regulation. And what is regulation? How can I implement that in my life? And at the end of the day, how good are we at becoming what I refer to with clients as state masters? Meaning that given the nervous system that we have and the fact that it has only one primary job, which is to keep us safe, how well are we making sure that our nervous system is in fact feeling safe? Because it does that. At the end of the day, our nervous system tries to keep us safe through two main modes, essentially. One way is what's called activation, which we likely have referred to or heard at one point or another as the fight or flight response, and a deactivation, otherwise known as our shutdown and freeze. And ideally, as change masters, we want to move essentially fluidly through those states, the activation and deactivation, regulation and dysregulation, and be able to navigate those states at all times, whenever we want, at any given context, in any given point in our days and throughout our lives and throughout the weeks, months, years that we live. And ultimately here, the goal about regulation, learning our nervous system, the goal is never to not feel stressed. Ultimately, it's to return to balance. And as a Libra myself, someone who is all about balance, I'm here to tell you it is actually a lot easier than you might think. And that's why we're not doing a lot of the thinking in today's episode. We're going to walk away with 3 tools to help regulate your nervous system, simple techniques that I apply in my practice all the time, and ones that I myself even return back to again and again. So a couple visuals to help us out are going to be shared on the screen. And I'm excited to be able to share some of this, because the more people that I talk to and more people who are evolvers, who want change and who want to implement change, the more I realize how underutilized our state regulation truly is, and underutilized the skill set in being able to master our nervous system has truly been cultivated. So I'm going to add to the stage in just a moment. Great. Okay. So you should see to my right, which is essentially my little drawing here of our nervous system. So the central nervous system is ultimately divided into 2 primary structures. So as you can kind of see at the very top of this umbrella, you see on the left-hand side, it is the central nervous system, which is comprised of the brain and the spinal cord. And then on the right-hand side is what we call our peripheral nervous system. And that's comprised of a little bit more than what you see on the left-hand side there. So I want us to take a quick look at what this is, because of the fact that in future episodes, we are going to learn not only how to regulate our nervous system, but how to do so at a level that is, like I said, elite and masterful. So we're gonna bring that down now. We're gonna remove that from the stage, because I find that it is, and it can be quite overwhelming. What I'm going to bring to the stage next is a little bit of a more visual as to, maybe something a little bit more close to us, which is us as human beings and what it looks like to be in our nervous system. So I find interactive tools incredibly helpful when I'm working with clients. And this is what we have, the nervous system. So yes, my drawing's great and all, but when we can actually see our nervous system as if we are literally having invisible visual, we can see through the body, we can see our nervous system and just how amazing it is. So our nervous system ultimately is comprised of so much, and it's so, in my opinion, incredible because of the fact that our entire nervous system is all designed, like I said, to really keep us safe. So the goal here, as we learn the nervous system, as we learn regulation and regulation techniques, is not to run away from stress. It's not to never feel stressed. It's to return to a balance that honors our nervous system and what it is set up, what it is designed to do. So I'm going to move over to a little bit of a different visual now. So obviously my hand drawing is great and all, and having 3D vision when it comes to our nervous systems and what that looks like, you can see the brain and the nervous system throughout the body. But I want us to think about it a little bit more conceptually, like now a ladder. And this is where us understanding what state we are in is critical. In comes polyvagal ladder, which is essentially thinking of your nervous system, and at any given time throughout the day, your nervous system is moving through, up and down this ladder. At the top, what you'll see is what's called ventral vagal. And that is the state, otherwise known as when you feel safe, you feel connected, you feel present. And these are the states that we always want to be in. We always want to feel safe, connected, present, and really willing to be in that like calm, cool, collected vibe. And that's where actually change can be some of the best when we're in this state, because we are simply feeling safe at the nervous system level and our brains are online fully. So when we're in at the top of this state, what's called as ventral vagal, if you're feeling that safe in connectivity and you feel super present, that's how you know your nervous system is there. It's in that state. It's not in fight or flight. It's not a freeze or fawn or collapse. And a lot of us, when we think about our nervous system ladder, are usually moving and ping-ponging between the sympathetic activation, which is in the middle. You're feeling activated, anxious, maybe reactive. And to some degree, your nervous system feels a sense of danger. Likely, a lot of us are living in what's known as survival mode. And survival mode is essentially up and down this ladder, truly focusing in on sympathetic and dorsal vagal. And at the bottom, dorsal vagal is that shut down, disconnected, maybe numb feeling. And so I've said in past episodes that most advice, most books, most things that you're likely consuming are assuming that you're in a ventral vagal state, which is you feeling calm, present, cool, connected. And the reality is, the large majority of human beings spend their entire day, every waking moment, either in sympathetic activation or in a dorsal vagal collapse state. And so while that advice assumes that you're at the top and you're likely reading the books, taking the courses, maybe even going to class, writing papers, doing things that are trying to move that needle of change for you in the direction of your life, many people are not. And likely you're not in a ventral vagal state all the time. And so again, it's not to avoid stress. And what this episode is about, it's about knowing how to what's called downregulate or upregulate. Downregulating is meaning you're going from a sympathetic activation a little bit down to more of a cooler, calmer state. Upregulation is if you're in a dorsal vagal collapse state and you're upregulating to try to climb this ladder. And so we want to be able to navigate stress because we cannot avoid it, nor should we. We are not always going to be in a survival state if we are evolvers. Why? Because we master our state. And when we can master our state, we recognize that this brain that we have here, it's not just about thinking our way into change, although it is beautiful if you look at it, right? It is extremely incredible what we are able to do when we apply our conscious thought. However, you cannot just think your way out of a state that your body is in. And that is something that for me and for so many of my clients, we know this intellectually, but so many of our bodies are like, yeah, so how do we actually move from state to state? In other words, from one part of this regulation ladder to another. And this is where it gets fun. Because if the system doesn't feel safe, it's going to override any intention that you might have to learn, to grow, to evolve. And I remember even experiencing this when I was in my undergrad. When I tried to apply some of the things that I would study, I'd be reading pages for, again, so many hours, but nothing would absorb in. Or I'd be wanting to perform at an elite level or present or whatever. And it just wasn't sticking. So the lack of stickiness of whatever it is that you're trying to apply in your life is a direct byproduct of your nervous system and how dysregulated it is. So we're going to close today's episode with 3 tools that you can use and you can apply so long as you know what state you are in. So when I refer to a state, I am referring now henceforth to a ventral vagal, a sympathetic activation, or a dorsal vagal collapsing standpoint. And I want you, evolvers, knowing what your state is in so that any context, any situation, you can use one of the 3 tools that we do together right now to be able to change your state. Because when you can change your state, you can change the story that your brain is telling to yourself. When you can change the story, you can change your state. It's reciprocal. It's dynamic. Our bodies are huge assets to be able to implement and affect agency of change. So we are today becoming those change agents. And I'm so excited to share with you some 3 tools that are super simple applying in your life at any given time. So what's the first one? The first one is your breath. Now, hear me out. Your breath is what connects your body to your brain. And essentially what is putting your brain online. So if you're feeling shame or if you're struggling to change, your body needs to come back into itself so that your brain gets signal signs of safety. And the breath is the fastest way to signal safety. Okay. So what we want you to do is what's called a 4-7-8 technique, which is a slow inhale through the nose for a count of 4. And then you hold for 7. And then a longer exhale through the mouth. Even just doing that for 30 to 60 seconds, it can begin to shift your state. It is amazing what the breath can do for us. And yet so many of us are operating with breath up here in our chest and are not consciously, through the tool of the breath, pushing that breath down into our lower abdomen. So I love the visual of expanding. Imagine a balloon expanding in your belly as you really inhale. So you're not just inhaling at the top of your chest, because that's further inducing sympathetic activation and not necessarily fully changing your state. Number 2 is a somatic-based technique. So this is where we really start to tap out of that breath that we just talked about. But ultimately, sometimes your body, it needs a stress response reset. And I'm sure you've seen a dog see another dog get really jacked up and really, really aggressive. And then all of a sudden, once the dog passes and they're done barking at one another, then they shake it off. Our nervous systems kind of work very similar to that. And I think if you need to remember this, think of the dog, right? Think of the dog where after there's a stressful moment, its body is still holding on, and the body is designed to get rid of that. But if we're just steaming through our day, steamrolling all of these little techniques, we're not going to apply a somatic body-based technique to shake out that stress. So it can look like quite literally shaking out. So I'm doing the shoulders, and this is shaking your body out. I know it might seem or feel silly. That stretching, give yourself a little bit of a stretch there. One of my favorites personally. It can look like walking. It can look like moving. And my favorite can look like a little bit of dancing. Put on your favorite song and do a little glide, a little glide. Shake out the body, even if you need to shake out your hands and maybe you're in a seated position. The goal here for your somatic based techniques for regulation, it's not to fix yourself, but ultimately to release what your body is holding. Okay. So we just did the breath. We just did somatic. Now let's talk about sensory. One way to regulate yourself is ultimately to tell all of your senses that your nervous system knows what environment you're reacting to, what environment you're in. And so you might have heard the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. There are so many different techniques, but what's so incredible about our nervous system is that we can shift our states by literally touching something around us that is grounding us. So we can do that. I personally prefer to dig my feet into the ground, and that really helps me ground myself and essentially taps you into the deeper senses that are helping you attune to the environment around you. You can do so by that, looking around very slowly. If you have a doorway in your office or wherever you are experiencing a heightened sensitivity or stress, you can frame the doorway. You can look out the window and focus your gaze on something that brings you joy, but do so slowly and at your own pace, and feel those feet on the ground. Simple awareness creates safety. And that is critical for us to understand when we need a state of safety, whether it be before an exam, whether it be before a date, whether it be before a huge board meeting, whether it be before a big workout or something big for you. It's critical to understand that regulation isn't just this something extra that we do. More often than not, actually, it's a skill. Regulation is a skill that a lot of us haven't been taught, or someone's made fun of us for when we actually applied it. But ironically, regulation is the foundation of everything that we do, and it allows everything else to work in our lives, including implementing change. And so if you've been trying to change, it hasn't worked, it might not be because you're doing whatever inputs you're focused on. It might be because you're doing them wrong. It's not about the wrong or you doing them wrong. It might be because your system has not felt safe enough yet in order to actually experience that change. So what I can encourage you to do is focus in on the fact that we just went through some 3 critical tools that now you have in your tool belt at any given point. Change does not start with forcing yourself forward, despite what narrative you might have that encourages that. It starts with you helping your nervous system feel safe enough to move. So I encourage you to choose one tool that we talked about today. Define where your state is, where on the ladder you want to be, and use this tool to get you up the ladder or moving down the ladder. And if it's dancing, I celebrate you. If it's breath work, I celebrate you. If it's even splashing some cold water on your face, I celebrate you, because that's implementing the change that we're talking about today. And our nervous systems, they need to feel this safety before it actually changes. So if you want slower, calmer, quieter reflections, click the link in the show notes to join the Evolve Reflections channel, where I'll share some insights that you can apply in your day-to-day. Otherwise, I'm grateful that you're here, that you're evolving, that you're trusting this safe space for you to actually implement the change that you wish to be in this world. Until next time, keep evolving and use these tools. Bye, everyone.